Welcome to our monthly local phenology leader community of practice call. On today is October 21st of 2022, and we've almost made it through the month of October. So good job, everybody, for that. Today, what we wanted to focus on is being able to kind of how do we engage our volunteers when the season is slow. And that's something that we hear a lot from you guys. Is just like there's nothing going on with the phenology right now, and how do we keep people engaged? So we're gonna talk about that a little bit today. We're gonna brainstorm ideas, especially since this is recorded, and then other people can get ideas from that as well. But yeah, that is the purpose of our program today. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to go into a breakout room, and it's going to be all four of you are here. So you four are going to get into a breakout room where Erin and I aren't listening in to you guys. So you have an opportunity to like talk amongst yourselves as local phenology leaders. And we're going to have you guys play a game called Roses, Buds, Thorns. And if you're in the local phenology course, we already played this game. And it's because it's a great game. And the purpose of Roses, Buds, Thorns is basically everyone goes around and they say something, something that's a rose, which is like a positive experience. So in regards to either your experience as a volunteer or as a student or as a leader, what's something positive that you've experienced in like engaging volunteers or students in regards to, especially when the season is slow, like what's a thing that kind of worked that to get people together when times are slow? A bud is something that is kind of new to you and exciting to you. So, or like something kind of like that you're hoping to grow, right? So roses is something like, oh, this is a beautiful rose, right? Something positive. A bud is something growing, right? Something that you're kind of thinking of, but you don't know how to do the details maybe, or something you heard about, you're not quite how to implement it. So that's a bud. And then a thorn is a challenge you've had. And so, and I'm going to challenge you guys to don't just make your thorn. It's hard to like engage people. Yeah, it is. But try to think of a specific example where you tried something engaging and it just didn't quite work out the way that you had envisioned it in your head. Or maybe there was a slow season and just like, God, gosh, I just didn't have like a way to do it exactly. And I lost some volunteers or something like that. So what's a more specific thorn of a challenge that you've had with engaging with volunteers in the off season? So you guys are going to go into a breakout room. Oh, there's 5 of you guys now. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit more time than I was planning, just so, because otherwise when there's 2 people in a breakout room, it is a little bit different. So you guys will go into a breakout room and go ahead and go around the circle and talk about a rose, a bud, and a thorn in regards to engaging with volunteers in the off seasons, either from your own personal experience as a leader or as a volunteer. I will give you guys 20 minutes. So we'll come back at 10:30. We're going to go around and we're going to talk about what you guys talked about. We're going to talk about some things that we've heard from other local phenology programs and ways that they were able to engage communities when times were slow. And then we're gonna talk about annual reports and ways that you can show volunteers like, hey, just so you guys know, this is a way that you guys really shined this year, and here's how I can share with what you guys have accomplished this year. Does that sound good? Can I get a thumbs up from the people I can see if that sounds good, or if you'd like me to clarify? Awesome, perfect. So I'm going to put you guys into a breakout room. And usually with a breakout room, it's nice to have someone who's a leader who kind of like manages the time and makes sure everybody gets a turn, because you're going to get 20 minutes. So when you're in the breakout room, figure out who most recently had a birthday that passed. So if your birthday is tomorrow, you are the last in line, right? If your birthday was yesterday, you are the leader. So figure out who had the most recent birthday, and it doesn't have to be year, just a date. And we'll meet back with you guys in 20 minutes. So I'm going to make your breakout room and I'm going to create it. And we'll see you guys in 20 minutes. All right, welcome back. Welcome everybody. All right, so let's talk about some of our roses, buds, thorns that you thought were particularly interesting or that you want to bring up that you think could be helpful to the group in general. We were in one breakout room, but also this is being recorded so that other people can learn from this as well. So let's see, how about the group leader, whoever the group leader was, if you want to tell us a little bit about if there was a common theme of roses, buds, and thorns. Yeah, thank you, Heather. That you kind of noticed with the group.
I'm going to start with the thorn because it seemed to be pretty basic, and that's kind of, I would say, the turnover of volunteers. You get them trained or they come for a season and then they move on. And I think that was one thing, if my group agrees with me, that we found kind of in common. And I guess for kind of a bud, we had several people who are relatively new, and they've got some new things going on that they're pretty excited about, and trying to, I think somebody is making a brochure for their group, because a lot of people don't want to sit and be by themselves looking at a video, but they'd rather at least have something in their hand. And it seems like a bud, another one was just one-on-one conversations with a new volunteer. Is that about right? Is that what you were talking about too?
Yeah, or an in-person orientation where if I do get some signups from the citizen science general orientation, then before they go and get trained, because one of our site lead trainers said, well, sometimes they come and they're not sure if that's a bud or a flower, and they're not sure what's going on. So if we have the orientation in person first, the video is great. It's always going to be there as a resource. They can go back because there's a lot of information, but to have it in person rather than say, here's a video, after you watch it, call me and we'll set up training. That's not quite as active. And maybe that's why we're not getting people, because they look at it and go, oh my God, this is well made. Instead of in person where you could say, hey, don't worry, we'll get you through this first part of, how to observe and things that might be a little bit easier to handle.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you're trying to bring new people in, and that balance of like too much information versus like, this is exciting, yeah, we're gonna get through it and how to train it so they're not just like, oh, this is.
And we have a group site, so even they said, oh, here's the link to the NPM website for setting up an account, and it drags you through setting up a site. And if our people don't have to do that. So to me, I found it confusing. I'm like, wait, am I supposed to be setting up this site and all that? Like I want to distill that down to what they need, because we've already set up the group, we've already picked the plans. So maybe that's kind of turning them off. I don't know, but I thought maybe instead of just giving them the link, could do like a little teeny manual for them, stuff relevant for this group.
Yeah, that's right. So often you are prompted when you set up your account with Nature's Notebook, it'll prompt you to like set up a site right away. And yeah, they don't need to set up a site. They just need an account so that they can join their group. Just so you know too, though, if they do use the app, so if you do it as part of the training of like, okay, you guys are going to create an account. If they do open up the app, it does prompt them to just do a Nature's Notebook account, and then it actually will prompt them to join a group, so they can then join your program. So that's yeah. All right, so is it all right if I kind of bring up that volunteer turnover, because a lot of you guys have that in common? All right, and for you guys, do you notice, is your volunteer turnover, is it kind of a year-round issue for you guys, or is it pretty much when everything exciting happened, everything is dormant for a few months now, people don't come back as much, and then it's hard to bring them back in the spring? Which of those kind of scenarios, or if it's a completely different scenario that you're noticing with turnover, happens with you guys?
The challenge that I have is that quite a number of volunteers are winter residents of Arizona. And so when things start happening, they're gone. And then there are, a number of people, who have trouble with the heat. And so it's like, whoa, it's just way too hot, whatever. And the interesting thing is, well, I don't know, because people still haven't come back to Tucson, because I think the weather's perfect myself, but
Finally cooled off.
I guess they're still, having okay weather wherever they are. So that's a bit of a challenge. And I'm just gonna put this out here. I didn't mention this in the group because it just sort of came to mind, and I guess I feel a little bit embarrassed by it, but I'm having trouble even motivating myself at times, because I just wonder how useful it is to be monitoring in a cultivated garden where things are watered, shade cloths are used, seeds are collected. I mean, you know what I mean? It's and I have engaged the people at the gardens. I mean, they're all for it, and they're interested in the climate change, etc. This is a personal thing that I'm having a problem with. It's like, really, how useful is this information? So, I don't know. I see the value of things like the monarchs, because you plant you have the milkweed and you want them to come, so you do everything you can to encourage them. So I don't know, but it's a personal motivation problem that I'm having with my project.
And I think that's a valid concern to have. And I appreciate you being honest about that too, because I can tell you right now, I have had periods where I haven't gone out, and it's like, what difference does this make? And I've got such a small data set that I'm collecting personally. How does it how does it fit into that bigger picture? And yeah, you're right, because it's like, when you're looking at phenology on these big national scales, you often think about okay, how's the climate of an area affecting these plants? But yeah, ours are watered and cultivated and we take care of them. And that's totally different than the ones who are literally on the other side of the wall,
Right.
that aren't, right? And that, yeah, like I said, that's totally okay and valid. Erin, I am going to pull you on this one a little bit, just because I know that there have been researchers who look at that, because we do that in the site visit details of are the plants watered or not? Is that, do you mind speaking on that just a little bit, or just so that Jan, just because it's watered doesn't mean the data you collect isn't okay or useful. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I totally understand where you're coming from on that. And I think you guys do report that the metadata that was talking about, where you say yes, this plant is watered, and you could even put the shade status if you want. And so yeah, if a researcher has a question that has to do with what's the difference between wild plants versus those that are in cultivation, or those that are even, they could restrict to botanical gardens and arboretums, and include your site, because you would see that it's the Mission Garden. They would be able to make a comparison. I think there's a lot of useful information there, especially for climate change adaptation, and thinking about, if we give plants a little bit of supplemental water, does that change the flowering period? And maybe that, allows them to keep up with pollinator shifts, or, who knows what we could discover about it. But I think it provides a really interesting data set that people can use for comparison with those wild plants. And then the other thing I would say is, I think you guys have recently kind of reselected plants there, right? Where you had a lot of more buy-in, or say, from the Mission Garden staff about what you're tracking.
Yeah.
So they,
Yeah,
I mean, they probably
they
have
choose it.
yeah, are there like fruit trees and things like that now that you're tracking?
Yeah, there's some, yeah, there are fruit trees as well as native plants, and
Mhm.
you know, they don't physically water a lot of native plants, but we're only talking 5.5 acres here, maybe,
Mhm.
not even. It's less than that actually. And so when you have an irrigation system, our native plants know how to get to that.
Yeah, right. I'm sure. Yeah, so with like the fruit trees, it could be that it doesn't really matter that they're watered and shaded. Like the garden wants to know, like, when is the phenology
Right.
happening? Maybe it's like, informing when are the fruit going to be on the trees? When should we invite people to come and like see the flowers? And so that would be interesting, regardless of if they're watered and really useful for the garden itself. So I feel like your data are really useful for both the people that are in your local technology program at the gardens, as well as scientists that would potentially use the data for
Mhm.
comparison purposes. So I don't know if that helps with motivation at all. But
Yeah, they loved when we did the buffalo grass or
Mhm.
on the outside of the
Yeah,
garden wall, because they don't have time to pay attention to that.
yeah,
And, you know, when I told them they've got flowers, they got a group of people together and pulled them.
there you go. Yeah.
So that part I got.
Yeah.
It's the cultivation part. But yeah, that helps, Erin. I just need to work on myself.
Oh, you're doing
Internal
great.
thing.
We really appreciate how motivated you are to just keep up with it and get other people interested.
And that's interesting too, Jan, because when we were thinking about the slow season, we were always thinking about the winter being the slow season,
Right.
but for you guys, it's the busy season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that it's a safety thing, right? Especially if you're in Arizona and the heat is like part of that slow season. And so yes, definitely focusing on making sure the volunteers feel heard is going to be like a huge thing of that. If they're like, yeah, it's too hot, it is okay to say like, yeah, don't worry about it. Your safety is the priority for us. And, when, we'll keep you in the loop for, or we can schedule you when we know it's going to be cooler or when the monsoons have started. So yeah, it's like one thing is whenever you're dealing with volunteers too, and there's times where they can't come because it's like too hot or they don't live here or things have slowed down and it's hard to keep their interest. It is part of that, like, oh, it takes some work, but like being able to reach out with them and keeping them in the loop. Because once you say to a volunteer, like, yeah, don't worry about it right now, just come back later, never see them again. So even acknowledging like, hey, you guys, there's a huge heat wave right now, and it just really isn't safe for you guys. We last got an observation on this date. We are going to come back on this date with a group together to like walk it together and see how things have changed can be a way to bring them back. So actually making a scheduled like, yes, yes, it's hot right now, or yes, it's winter right now. Or there's like whatever natural occurrence is happening that volunteers can't come in, or maybe a volunteer in particular has a medical issue, right? Even if you put in your calendar at least a time, not even trying to get them back, but let's say a volunteer's gone because they're like, hey, I broke my wrist, I can't come back. Having some sort of spreadsheet like so-and-so broke their wrist, even if you just go check in on them and just see how they're feeling. You don't even have to say like, when are you coming back?
Right.
So they know that you know they exist and that they matter to you is a huge difference for these guys. And so it's nice when you have the smaller projects especially, but when you have even some sort of note of like, okay, I can't remember this person exactly, but I know that they work here. I know that, they have their husband or their dog that they just like adore. So if you haven't heard from them in a while, they haven't checked in for a while, because you're able to manage your users and see when people have observed. Just checking in like, hey, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. How's, I don't know the dog's name. It's October, Pumpkin, right? Some people have dogs named Pumpkin. So like, how's Pumpkin doing? Just reminds them that, hey, by the way, we do care about you and you're not just hassling them for, more volunteer hours. Doing some sort of social network or some sort of community hub can be really helpful as well. So there's lots of free platforms out there where you can make group discussions and you can like put up little prompts, like even if it's a slow season, like, hey, like what phenology do you guys notice outside your window today? Just to keep them thinking about phenology, even if they're not at your site and monitoring your plants. It just keeps phenology in their brain and keeps it like, oh yeah, like this is something I enjoy doing, and oh, it's that right season again, I can get started. Can help with bringing people back who might have kind of that limited engagement, or that like, oh, you know, are we doing, you know, they come in off and on. Is that kind of helpful for the ideas for you guys? What do you all think? Or what is something where you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds great, but I have XYZ issue where it's really hard to be able to keep in touch with volunteers?
I just have two questions. One is, I know a lot of volunteers are in my age group, and they're not really comfortable with computers as far as doing social things. But I'm wondering, has anybody tried having them, when using art, they go out and do some sketches? Has anybody tried that? If that works, or then maybe you can show the art on your Facebook page or something.
I will pause in case someone does do that, because I have opinions. And they're good. All right.
I have not done that, but I love that idea. I just attended a nature journaling like 101 workshop. And I have done some nature journaling before. And I've also taught that to school kids as a way to make observations. And so I think doing that is a really great idea, and it engages people on a different level. And that might be a really cool thing to try, especially in the off season, to really make those in-depth observations of what things look like when we're not really paying attention to them. You know, oh, it's winter, it's just a tree. Well, there's still things happening there. And making those close-up observations of changes, I think, is a really cool idea.
I also love that idea, and I've been seeing it popping up a lot in the environmental education communities of like how to bring art into observations, because yes, it is a way we're like, yeah, it's slow, we're still doing this together, we're still learning together. And some of you may have volunteer engagement coordinators, or you're the volunteer engagement coordinator, but like, even if you are not great at the art, sometimes it helps them when their leader is also not that great, and then we all feel a little less self-conscious about our own insecurities. But yes, art is definitely a really great way. So, and especially if you know that the off season is coming, and have like kind of those scheduled ahead of time so that your volunteers, as it starts to slow down, have something to look forward to. And Jan too, if you guys have indoor space where it's like, yeah, it's summer and it might be too hot for them to go outside, but yeah, if you have some sort of indoor space together where you bring in maybe one of the potted plants, or even some old seed pods and do still lifes, all of that can be a really great way to keep them involved and keep their brains going and enriched, and maintaining that kind of excitement for your program. Because yeah, if you're just going out and collecting data all the time, we'll get bored. And even not in the off season, even if you have during the like on season, you know, when things are exciting, having some of those intermittent, like someone recorded blooms, let's like, you know, let's go look at them together. So having some things where they're scheduled, you know, you have so-and-so coming in on these certain days of the week or every few weeks, but then also regular events, and especially if they're special events for your volunteers, like yeah, Wendy, if you're like, hey, I'd like you guys to do our program, we do collect these data. We also have these activities that we do just for the phenology observers. Then you get that little bit of like exclusivity, and you get to be a part of this community, which can be exciting for some people rather than just we're filling out data sheets. Because and you can even look at as the leader, right, coming up to those activities, you can look up what your observers have been noticing in the field and address that and make that a part of the activity once they're there. Like, hey, you guys have been seeing open flowers on the saguaros, and our activity is kind of centered around that.
Yeah, I've never thought of doing that as an activity, but I have like four or five journal pages on just seed pods that I collected from native plants.
Yeah.
So the comparison and seeing how they're different and how many seeds are in a pod, and like Tora versus mesquite, something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. And you guys
Can I
have a
say-
lot of events. I see that, but yeah, some of those exclusive ones too. Yeah. Yeah, Wendy, sorry, go on.
Just curious though, does that, I guess when it comes time to look at data and things, does that really affect if you're suddenly not having observations of, like people aren't seeing the things bloom like the saguaros? They're not making observations. Does that kind of mess up your data if you're trying to get graphs and things from that later? I don't know. I'm not really asking it correctly, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, so like especially with swirls, right? That window of like there's actually swirls blooming is so narrow, right? So yeah, in the wintertime, you're if they're not going out and looking at saguaros specifically, it's not going to mess up the data at all. What's really important is when you're anticipating they're going to be blooming soon and starting to get it so that you get those no's, like no blooms, no blooms, no blooms. So then when the blooms appear, then we know someone was out there before they appeared and said they weren't there. And now we know we can pinpoint when they're there. So that's another thing too, is like, because you can look at your data from the previous year and be like, okay, this is when they were blooming. Here's where they're blooming in other places around or around, not the country, because it's the Sonoran Desert for you guys, but when they've been blooming before, and maybe have those anticipatory, hey, the winter's over, spring is coming, let's get together and start celebrating how we're going to start seeing these blooms soon. Or we could do a refresher walk together, like phenology refresher. We're going to go like get ready for the flowers and inviting them back in.
So it's not, it's okay if they're not observing the entire year, then it sounds like, because we're trying to figure out if we need a minimum, like, because in order to see the whole cycle and understand the plant at least a year. But as far as collecting the data, I didn't know if we needed to make some kind of minimum, or we're just happy if they can come and do a couple of months or something, and that's fine too.
Yeah, Erin, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, do you mean like to capture the full phenophase throughout the beginning, the peak and the end?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is it better to have 50 people that are there for those peak phases, or a few consistent observers that are observing year round? I don't know what's really the better scenario.
Well, yeah, it really, there's a lot of ways to answer that. I feel like from the perspective of like the data set and the usefulness of the data set, like Samantha was saying, it's good to be able to capture the start, and you want to capture the peak, and you want to capture the end with as much precision as you can. So, if you can kind of like, if you have the ability to tell people, we really want people to go out more often now when things are really happening, and then you can do less later. So you try to get the flowering and the fruiting for saguaros, and then you could say like, okay, we've recorded our last no, we're done with saguaros for now. But you also, from the perspective of volunteer engagement, you don't want to lose people. So I think if you had species where you have a species for the spring, you have one for the summer, you have one for the fall.
I
you
know,
kind
that's
of choose it that way. But yeah,
yeah.
there's different things to balance.
Yeah, that's what I thought would be perfect, because I mean, here we could have things blooming all year potentially, at least.
Yeah.
If we set up the site right, then they'd always have something that they could see blooming.
Yeah, if you do the Desert Refuge project, which is the milkweeds and monarchs in the winter, you could have something for the winter time too. Yeah, and I was thinking too about talking about like, looking back at your data. That's something that Jan, I feel like that's another motivator is, if you have multiple years of data, it doesn't really matter whether your site's being watered or shaded, as long as it's consistent. We want to know like, how are your plants responding each year? And the temperature is not something you can control really. So
Right.
is that changing from year to year, and that's super interesting. So maybe another motivator is looking at what did happen this year, and can we anticipate what's going to happen next year, and like see if we can pay attention to the weather, and like kind of even like have like a contest or something with volunteers, like what's it going to be this year, when are we going to see that first flower or first fruit, based on what you kind of know about your plants.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we've got a couple minutes left, and I do feel like I could like chat all day, but that's not reasonable. I just want to do a quick reminder too, just because it is the end of October now. And I think, is it January, Erin, that we put out for the annual report, the notifications for annual reports and all that? Or is it?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, the survey requests usually go out in December, and then we try to ask for those back by January. And then, yeah, annual reports, I think most LPPs are thinking about them at the end of the year or January, so they can look back at the year.
Yeah. So we do offer like an annual report guide. And when I had my own local phenology program, I loved writing my annual report. And it's because it's a chance for you to communicate with your volunteers or even your guests, if you put it on the website, what you guys did in the year. And it includes like, this is the purpose of our program, to remind people the purpose. Here's some of the data that you guys collected this year. Here's how it compares to previous years. And it doesn't have to be really long. And the data that you show them can be data just from the graphs and the visualization tool, or the calendars and the visualization tool of like, here's when things were blooming. Here's some of the pollinators you guys saw. Here's some, like, sometimes it's nice when there's an appendix, if your volunteers like to share pictures, or if they like to share that, if you did art, right? You can have an appendix of here's what we did with our art. But just to kind of show, like, yes, it's nice to write the reports, and we love getting your guys' reports because we love to see what you guys are doing. But it's for your volunteers too, so that they know, like, oh my gosh, like, look at, when you're in that moment and you're like collecting the data, it's hard to see that big picture. And then when you see it all together in this thing at the end of the year, like, oh my gosh, look at all we accomplished this year. And even then it can be like lessons learned and goals moving forward and things to look forward to this year. It gives them something to look forward to as well. So it is kind of a pitch of like, yes, we put out reminders to send us our annual reports. We're not going to be like, you know, you didn't send your report, but I love the reports because it's such a cool opportunity to be able to share everything that they all accomplished together. And then you can have like a potluck with a celebration, and like, and you can have a presentation. Look at what you guys did this year. Is just a really nice way to just celebrate what your volunteers accomplished and help them like have that feeling like, yes, what I did was important, and I want to continue doing this because it's important. So, and even ourselves, sometimes it's nice for us to just like actually have to sit and think about what happened in the year. Like, oh my gosh, look at everything I did. So thank you guys so much. If you have any final thoughts, now is a great time to do so, but otherwise it's 10:56. You guys are free to go about your days, enjoy your weekends, have a safe autumn, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank
Samantha.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Yep.
Erin, can you stay on for a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
And I'll let you know, Chris, about the bees. Thank you.
Yep. Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
And you want me to say,
Sorry, Gail, I saw that you called. I haven't had a chance to follow up. Oh, what's that?
I was gonna say, do you guys want me to stay too, or should I just head out and let you guys finish your?
Oh, no, I just wanted to share some good news.
Oh.
I've been trying to get some really interested people in Louisiana to help with Time to Restore. I had a great trip yesterday to Nicholls State University in Thibodaux. I met the Dean of College of Sciences and Technology, Dr. Doucette. They have all great Cajun names. And he was